Welcome to a brand new episode of Law and Batting Order. I'm your host, Tony Iliakostas. Here are some quick hits from the past 2 weeks. Legends come and go, but when someone who left an indelible mark in an industry passes away, that is especially hard. On Tuesday, NFL Films president Steve Sabol passed away after fighting 18 months with brain cancer. Sabol was a pioneer in the film industry, but more so in the sports industry, as he was the very first filmmaker to document football games. From mastering the art of slow motion to having exhilarating symphony music playing in the background, Sabol made viewers around the country appreciate the sport of football, both from an artistic standpoint as well as from a fan's perspective. Sabol will certainly be remembered for his accomplishments, and our hearts and prayers go out to Steve Sabol's family. We are entering Week 3 of the NFL season, and teams have been playing incredibly well so far. It's no surprise that teams like the Browns and Chiefs have been playing subpar due to a poor core offense, as both teams enter Week 3 0-2. However, for teams like the Philadelphia Eagles and the Houston Texans, they have proven to be competent teams, and their play will certainly lead to stiff competition down the road. And I would be remiss to not give a shout out to several quarterbacks who have been downright stellar thus far. These quarterbacks include Robert Griffin III, who has been griffining with the Redskins, New York Giants QB Eli Manning playing elite football, and Matt Ryan, aka Matty Ice, sizzling down in Hotlanta. First, the NFL entered a lockout last summer, then the NBA piggybacked and entered a lockout that lasted until Christmas Day 2011. And now the NHL is the latest sports league to enter a grueling labor battle. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman announced earlier this week that the league would be entering a lockout after the league and the NHL Players Association failed to strike a deal on a new collective bargaining agreement. What is more depressing is that the league canceled all preseason games in September. The season is slated to start on October 11th, so fans, players, and teams are hoping that a resolution can be made to put the hockey lockout to an end. Today's Order in the Court will be discussing Major League Baseball's drug testing policy and potential revisions that should be made to this body of law. Commissioner Bud Selig and MLB brass have taken action in trying to prevent the rampant use of performance-enhancing drugs in baseball since 2008 by enacting a strict yet thorough drug testing policy. This drug testing policy lays out in clear fashion what performance-enhancing drugs are prohibited from the sport. The policy also enumerates what the punishments are for being caught using performance-enhancing drugs while also listing the process by which someone is punished. The drug testing policy was discussed quite some time ago on this program when I interviewed ESPN investigative reporter Mark Feener-Ruwada. You can view that episode by clicking the annotation on the right-hand side of the screen or by clicking the link below this video. Once again, as we have seen at least once every year, a notable baseball player has been caught using performance-enhancing drugs. This year, it was San Francisco Giants outfielder Melky Cabrera, who was at one point leading the National League with a .346 batting average. He was even voted into this year's All-Star Game, and his stellar play led him to winning the All-Star Game MVP award. However, in late August, Cabrera was caught using synthetic testosterone that led to a suspension from the sport for 50 games. Cabrera's suspension has led to a great deal of discussion of whether or not Major League Baseball's drug testing policy is effective as a body of law in the scope of Major League Baseball. In today's episode, I'll discuss briefly the rules set out by Major League Baseball on its drug testing policy and whether or not modifications should be made to make it a more effective body of law. Major League Baseball's drug testing policy, which you can view by clicking the link below this video, lays out in clear fashion anything and everything about how drug testing is conducted in the sport of baseball. In Section 1A of the policy, it states that Major League Baseball must appoint an independent program administrator whose responsibility is to oversee the league's drug testing procedures and make sure that all measures are taken to properly test players. However, the independent program administrator is not in a position to punish a player. That responsibility is the commissioners and the commissioners alone. Section 2 goes on to state in great detail the types of drugs and performance-enhancing drugs that are banned by Major League Baseball. These drugs include, among others, steroids and synthetic testosterone, the two most common substances used by players who are tested positive for drugs. Section 3 goes on to explain the process by which a player is tested for drugs. Briefly, a player is tested at the beginning of spring training and at random points throughout the season via urine sample for performance-enhancing drugs. The sample is then sent to an independent drug laboratory that analyzes the urine sample. If the test comes back positive with any indication of performance-enhancing drugs, then the player is reprimanded under Section 7 of the drug testing policy. If the player commits a first-time offense, the player is suspended 50 games. If this is a second-time offense, the player is suspended 100 games. Finally, if a player is caught using performance-enhancing drugs for a third straight time, the player is banned from Major League Baseball. The player has the option of appealing his case to an arbitration panel according to Section 8, essentially arguing and having the burden of proving that he should not be punished in the case and that a flaw occurred in the drug testing process. We have only seen one instance in Major League Baseball where a player succeeded in appealing his drug suspension, and that player was last year's National League MVP, Ryan Braun. On paper, Major League Baseball's drug testing policy is doing a solid job in enforcing strict sanctions on players who test positive for performance-enhancing drugs. However, this body of law still requires some modifications, which is why I believe that this drug testing policy is missing two essential elements that would make this drug testing policy far more effective. The first condition is that Major League Baseball should include stricter human growth hormone testing. According to Section 383 of the drug testing policy, a player's blood sample will be collected at an unannounced time only during spring training and will be tested for HGH. According to many critics and scientific experts, there are question marks regarding HGH testing as it is still in a premature phase. It is easier for a player to get away with using HGH, so Major League Baseball is still sorting out effective ways of testing players for HGH. Nevertheless, Major League Baseball's current drug testing policy expires in December of 2016, and hopefully by that time more information will be revealed regarding accurate HGH testing that will prompt testing to take place during the regular season as well as during spring training. The second modification that should be made is that a player who tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs should be forfeited from all in-sport competition, whether the player is pursuing the highest batting title or is in the running for the most valuable player. As recent as this past Friday, Melky Cabrera asked Major League Baseball to disqualify him from the batting average race in the National League. He was quoted saying the following, "To be plain, I personally have no wish to win an award that will widely be seen as tainted, and I believe that it would be far better for the remaining contenders to compete for that distinction." As a baseball fan, I have full respect for Melky Cabrera, who clearly used testosterone but wanted to preserve the integrity of the sport by disqualifying himself. What perturbs me, however, is that it was the player who had to make this request. Major League Baseball lacks a condition in their drug testing policy that would call for the same action, and as a league, Major League Baseball should be making this choice of disqualifying the player. If the whole purpose of the drug testing policy is to restore respect in the sport of baseball, then the policy needs to, no pun intended, step up to the plate by creating a condition that disqualifies a player from all in-sport competition in the season he tested positive. For example, in my opinion, even though Ryan Braun undisputedly tested positive for testosterone at the end of last season, it's a shame that Major League Baseball did not repeal his MVP award. His 50-game suspension was overturned because of a mishandling of his urine sample. However, no one ever tampered with his urine sample, and the scientific evidence clearly showed that Braun used synthetic testosterone, yet he retained his award. Perhaps this is something Major League Baseball should look into after the current policy expires in 2016. While Major League Baseball's drug testing policy requires some revisions, it is still a very effective body of law, and we must commend the commissioner and everyone else involved in the drug testing program for taking the initiative in diminishing the rampant use of performance-enhancing drugs in the sport of baseball. That's the show. Leave all your comments down below, and be sure to visit Law and Batting Order at lawandbattingorder.com, as well as on Facebook and Twitter. Take care, guys.